Back when I was a freshman in college, I lived in a dorm building and had a room to myself. The building was pretty typical. It was old, had several floors, and also a lounge area. The rooms did not have bathrooms in them, so each hallway had a large bathroom about halfway down it. One time, about a couple of months into my freshman year of college, I was up late in my dorm room. I was studying, and I would often stay up later than I should have doing homework or studying for classes. It was probably about 1 o'clock in the morning or so. I don't remember what time I had class the next morning at, but I was planning on going to bed soon. After finishing up my studies, I went out of my room to go to the bathroom down the hallway. I remember that I left my room, and as I began to walk down the hallway, I noticed something. It was just one really long and straight hallway, and at the very end, there was this guy wearing one of those old white goalie masks. I only saw him for like 2 seconds, and then he went out of sight at the end of the hallway, going around the corner that led to the stairwell. It seemed weird to me, especially because it was 1 o'clock in the morning. As I walked to the bathrooms, the hallway was completely quiet and empty, other than me. Everyone else was sleeping, no doubt. I thought the guy with the mask was probably another college guy playing a joke on a friend or something. Pranks in the dorms happen all the time, but normally those kind of things happen on weekends or nights where people are staying up late. I didn't think too much of it though, and I went into the bathroom and brushed my teeth and stuff. I was at one of the sinks in the bathroom, and to the right you can see the bathroom door, which is propped open. I was in the bathroom for maybe 5 minutes, and as I was at a sink finishing up, I saw movement to my right. It was somebody walking down the hallway past the bathrooms. When I looked, just for a second, I saw the same guy walking past the bathrooms now. He didn't look over at me, and he didn't stop or anything. After he had passed by, within a minute, I was done and left the bathroom. I went back to my room and then went inside and went to sleep. I didn't see that guy for a few days. However, a couple of nights later, I was in a similar situation. I stayed up late and went to brush my teeth before going to sleep. It was after midnight again, and when I walked out into the hallways, at first I didn't see him. But when I was walking back to my room, I heard somebody walking a long ways behind me in the hall. I turned around and noticed him walking towards me. He was still a really long ways away, but he was wearing that same mask. This seemed a little odd. I didn't know why somebody would be doing this, but I just went into my room and then got into bed. I fell asleep pretty quick, only to wake up a short time later. What woke me up was the sound of someone knocking on my door. It wasn't very loud, but enough to wake me up. And that didn't take too much, because I'm not a deep sleeper, and also things were so quiet at that hour. So I groggily sat up and listened. Whoever was at the door knocked again. I had just woken up and was not thinking the most clear, so I had no idea who it would be. I got up and walked over to the door and looked through my peephole. There I saw the same guy, still wearing the mask. He was just standing there waiting for me to open the door. I saw him knock again. However, I did not answer it. There's no way I was going to. After staying at the door for maybe another minute, he finally walked away. I was really creeped out by the experience. I didn't get a look at the guy's face because of the mask, but I had assumed that it was just a college kid. Well, about a week later, I hadn't seen the guy at all, but I heard about what happened. A man was arrested for trying to break into students' rooms, and it was the same guy wearing the mask. He was not even a student. It was some guy in his 40s, and that really creeped me out. I thought that it had been just some creepy but most likely harmless prank by a student. I had no idea that it was some crazy guy who didn't even go there. This is something that took place back when I was in college. It was my freshman year, and I attended a very large university. It's a well-known school in the United States and has over 20,000 students. The campus of the school is very nice, and there are neighborhoods surrounding it where many of the students live. When I was new to the college, I lived in the dorms on campus, and I made some friends rather quickly. I knew a couple of people from my high school that also went there, so I was able to be friends with them, but I also met some new people in my classes, and I was having a great college experience to start out. On one night, probably the third week of classes or so, I went to one of my first college parties. It was a Friday night, and there was probably at least 10 house parties around campus on any weekend night. My friend Jen told me about it, and she went with me. There were also some other people that we knew going as well. We hung out in the dorms for a while, having some drinks, and then went to the party later at night. I'm not even sure who lived in the house that we went to, but I believe they were upperclassmen. When we got there, it was pretty busy, and it only got busier and busier. It was a typical college house, kind of old, and in a neighborhood with lots of other houses. Nothing really stood out about it from the outside, but you could sort of hear the noise when you approached the property. After being there for probably an hour, it was extremely packed inside. There were people everywhere, all college students. I lost track of Jen, and didn't even know who hardly anybody was anymore. It also got extremely loud, with music and drunk kids talking loudly. After some time, the party got busted by the cops. No doubt there was multiple noise complaints from neighbors. We heard some kids yelling and looked and saw some flashing lights out front of the house on the street. In an instant, everybody took off scattering. Most of the people ran out of the back door or side door to the house. A few of them went out the front. Then they ran through the yard into neighboring streets. Some other kids even ran upstairs to hide. This was because many of the kids there were underage drinking and didn't want to get a ticket. So I followed most of the people out the back door. I was underage at the time, and I lost touch with all my friends. I just followed the mob, and when we got out into the street, people scattered even more. I walked down the sidewalk, and when things finally quieted down, I decided to go back to the dorms. We had walked there, but I hadn't paid the greatest of attention. It was kind of a far walk, and maybe took a good 20 to 30 minutes to get there. I was also somewhat intoxicated, which also caused me to lose direction. I was not super drunk or anything, but it certainly affected me. So I walked down the sidewalk, and soon I didn't see any other people. I was going in the direction that I thought the dorms were in, but really it was the opposite way. I figured I would see Jen or another one of my friends as I went back, because they would be heading the same direction, but I didn't. The farther I walked, the quieter the streets were. After like 10 minutes of walking, I stopped and called Jen, but got no answer. So then I went on my phone and actually looked up directions back to the dorms. As I was doing this, a car started to drive by. I was standing there stopped on the sidewalks, and the streets had been very quiet, with rarely cars going by. When the car got even with me, it stopped. I thought that maybe it was one of my friends offering a ride, but there was a man driving who looked older than college age, much older. He did offer me a ride though, but I did not want to accept it. I didn't know this guy, so it would not be a good idea. After he asked me if I needed a ride, I told him no thanks, I was fine. Then I saw on my phone that I had been going the wrong direction, and I saw where I now needed to go. The man asked me where I was going, and I said back to my dorm. He asked again if I was sure I didn't need a ride, and I said yes. He said okay, but did not drive off. The car remained just sitting there. I turned and started to walk the opposite way. A short time later, I heard the man driving away. I turned around to see his truck go out of sight. So then I started walking back, and it was now going to take a little bit longer, but at least I knew where I was going. I was walking down sidewalks, and most of them were very quiet and dark. About 10 minutes later, as I was still on the sidewalk, I finally heard someone else walking nearby. Somebody was on the sidewalk behind me a long ways back. I looked behind randomly and noticed that it appeared to be the same guy who had offered me a ride. This was really strange. Why would he be walking on the sidewalk after me if he had a car? The guy was a really long ways back, like I said, so I just ignored it. But as I kept walking, so did he. He did not go into a house or anything. He was following me for several minutes. I turned around and saw that he was a little bit closer, and I had been walking pretty fast. I didn't know what this guy was doing, so I started walking even faster now. But he was taller and larger than me and could no doubt walk faster. As I kept going, over the next few minutes, I heard his footsteps getting progressively closer to mine. This was beginning to creep me out. He was now within probably 50 feet of me. I needed to do something. As I kept walking, I started looking around. I turned onto a random street that I was not supposed to go down, but I was desperate. When I turned, of course the man did behind me as well. I walked down that street for a while, and then I heard something else. The slight sound of music. I looked to a house to my left, and all the windows were covered and nothing seemed out of the ordinary, but the muffled sound of loud music made me think that maybe there was a party going on there or something. I turned and just walked through the front yard. As I got closer, I noticed something else. There was what looked to be a college-aged boy wearing a sports jersey and a backwards hat, sitting in a chair on the front porch of the house. It was hard to notice him at first because all the lights were off. He was very casually sitting on the porch near the front door and drinking a beer. I walked right up to the front steps towards him. I told him the guy was following me and pointed to the man on the street. The man following me now started to approach the house, but was still out on the street. The college guy told me to go on inside, and I opened the door. There was a party going on inside the house. Not nearly as big as the one that I had come from, but still a party nonetheless. I didn't know anybody there, but I felt much safer now. I called Jen again from the house, but still got no answer. After being inside for maybe 5 minutes, I went back out. The college guy out front told me that he told the guy to get lost and saw him walking the opposite way. So I decided to take a chance and leave. I literally ran the rest of the way back to the dorms, and thankfully I made it back okay. When I got to campus, there were some more people out and walking around. Jen was back at the dorms, but her phone had apparently died. In the rest of my years going to school there, I had no problems with anything like that. I never saw that man again, and I never had any creepy experiences when walking around at night. I had a weird thing happen to me when I was in college. This was during my sophomore year of undergraduate, first semester. I lived with a roommate in the dorms that year. It was not somebody that I knew, and I had a random roommate. I had friends in college, but some of them got an apartment and I couldn't afford it, so I stayed in the dorms again. Anyways, my roommate was fine, and we became friends, but overall I never studied well in the room with him. I just felt more focused when I was all alone by myself and not in the small dorm room. One of the hall buildings on campus where I had a couple of my classes was pretty nice. There were a few places where you could study or hang out, and they were pretty comfortable. There were nice chairs and tables and things like that. In one of the areas on the second floor was my favorite spot to go and study, and I would go there pretty late at night many times. I would almost always be the only person there, and I had the whole space to myself. It was quiet and I could focus so much better. I didn't have any distractions, and my neck didn't hurt like it would in my dorm desk. So it became a routine to go there, not every night, but several nights a week probably, and I literally never had anybody else come and study near me, until one night. Most of the time, I would not encounter anyone in my late night study sessions. Occasionally somebody would walk by, or sometimes a maintenance person or professor would walk through the area. But one night, when I was by myself studying, this woman came up and sat in one of the chairs sort of right behind me and to my left. I noticed someone sitting down and sort of barely saw her out of the corner of my eye. I glanced over to look who it was. She appeared to be older than a typical college student, but I figured that she was still a student. She was maybe in her 30s. After sitting down, she took out a notebook, and I looked away and back to my work. She remained there and didn't really make any noise. Eventually, she got up and left after about 30 minutes. I thought nothing of it really. But the very next time I went to study, pretty much the same thing happened. That same woman came up and sat in the same spot about 30 minutes after I had got there. This time though, she didn't take out a notebook. I noticed that she appeared to just be sitting there. She was not doing anything. I felt like she was watching me, but I couldn't see from my angle. After a while, I looked over at her. When I did that time, she was not looking at me, but just kind of looking around. She wasn't studying or doing any work or reading. I didn't really know what she was doing. She remained there for a good 30 minutes or so before getting up and leaving. Now, the very next time after that, she came back again. Once more, she was not doing anything. I was confused, so I decided to get up and leave. I wasn't really annoyed, but I didn't have that much work left to do, and I just felt like leaving. When I did, the woman continued sitting there. I was curious, so as I walked past, I asked her if she had a lot of studying to do. She answered me and said, "Oh, I don't go to college." I said, "Oh, do you teach?" To that, she simply said no. Now, she was not wearing any kind of uniform or school employee clothing. I didn't really know who she was or what she was doing, but I just left at that point. I found it weird. I started to wonder if maybe this woman had a crush on me or something, but I figured that I was just boosting my ego for no reason to think that, so I went back to my dorm. The next time that I studied there, though, she came back again. She sat down like usual shortly after I had arrived. This time, I was really curious as to who this woman was, and what was weird about it is it's not like I went there at the exact same time every night. I would go at random times. Usually it was between 8 or 9 p.m., but sometimes it would be 7 or even 10 o'clock. So it wasn't like the same exact time. And this woman was going there almost right after me every single time. So this time, I got really curious as to who she was, so I decided to try to have a conversation with her. A little while after she sat down, I turned around and looked at her. She was not doing anything once again. No notebook or papers, no laptop, nothing. She wasn't even on her phone. But like right after I turned around and she saw that I was looking at her, she got up. Then she turned and started walking away really fast. I said, "What?" She didn't answer, but just kept walking away. I was really confused by this strange behavior, so I studied there a little bit and then left. Now that brings us to the last time that I studied there in that building that semester. So I went back a few nights later. I was in my usual spot and studying. The woman did not come up and sit there like she had the last 5 times or so. This was the first time in a while I didn't see her. However, about an hour or so into studying, I took a short break. I just sat up in my chair and stretched. I looked around, and all the chairs in this particular area were facing the windows and the walkway was behind you. I casually turned around just looking, and it appeared to be empty behind me, but it was not. I then noticed that the same woman was there as before. She was like halfway behind a wall which went around a corner. She was literally just staring at me. It was very creepy. As soon as she noticed that I saw her, she quickly ducked back around the corner. It was so strange. I instantly packed up my stuff and left. After that, I didn't study in that building for the rest of the semester, and I never saw that woman again. I don't know who she was or what she was doing. She apparently did not go to college as she told me. It was possible that she worked at the college in some capacity, but that doesn't explain her creepy behavior. Why did she always go there and sit behind me and stare at me? Especially that last time when she was around the corner. My senior year in college, I lived in this old house. I had 3 roommates living with me, and we were all friends since freshman year. We all had our own rooms in the house, and they were all on the 2nd floor. Mine was right across from Olivia's, and it was the closest to the stairs. A few months into the school year, and some strange things started happening. We started getting random knocks on the front door, or even the windows. The first time it happened, it was late at night, and a few of us were hanging out in the living room when there was a knock on the front door. We went over to look and see who was there, but when we got there, nobody was outside. We thought maybe it was a prank, or somebody was at the wrong house. A few nights later, though, it happened again. Once more, nobody was there. Then, when I was gone one time, the other girls told me that somebody had knocked on a back window, but whoever it was had ran away before they could see who did it. Another time, not long after this, we heard somebody running through the bushes of our front yard. It seemed as though somebody was prowling around our house at night. It would only happen at night, but we didn't know who. We knew our neighbors next door on both sides, as well as across the street. We had only met the neighbors to our left, and had seen the others around, but none of them seemed like they would do something like this. But then again, it could have been anybody. It wasn't really something that anyone in our friend groups would probably do either, so we just basically hoped that whoever was doing it would stop. And for a few days, maybe a week, they did. We were all starting to forget about it. But then, one night, I arrived home very late. I had an on-campus job working at some of the sporting events. The game had gone late, and so I didn't get back home until around midnight. During the 5-minute drive home, everything was fine. When I finally got back, all my roommates had gone to sleep already. The lights in the house were all off, and it was completely quiet. I was tired, but also very hungry from being at work for a long time. So I went upstairs, took a shower and changed, and then went back downstairs into the kitchen. I was cooking some ramen when I heard what sounded like somebody trying to open our front door. The door was locked and it was not in my view. They tried just that one time, and I walked over to the front door to see who was there, but by the time I got there, they were gone. I figured this was probably the same person who was always messing with us. I looked around through the front window for a short time. After not seeing anybody still, I went back to the kitchen and resumed cooking. However, only about 2 or 3 minutes later, I heard something outside. The kitchen was at the back part of the house and had a couple of windows overlooking the backyard. I couldn't really see anything though because it was so dark. There were also bushes right next to the window as well. It seemed as though somebody was walking through the bushes. As I looked out of the window, I soon saw the silhouette of a man walking through the backyard. It was too dark to see any details about him, but he was walking towards the back door, and I realized that he would probably try it. Thankfully, it was locked. I stopped cooking and ran out of the room. As I did, I heard him try the doorknob. I decided to call the cops then. I went into the living room and dialed 911. I told them that somebody was trying to break into our house. Then I went upstairs and waited. When the police got there, unfortunately the man was gone. Thankfully he didn't get inside though. And surprisingly to me, after that night we never had any more problems with him again. Maybe he saw that we had called the police somehow. Either way, I'm glad that he stopped prowling around out there. During my sophomore year of college, I was living in a dorm building. My room was on the 3rd floor out of 4, and I had a roommate who I lived with. One night, I had math homework and I was having a difficult time with it. At around 11 o'clock p.m., my roommate got ready for bed. I had to finish though, so I decided to go down into the basement to do so. In our dorm building, it was a pretty average setup. Each floor was just a long hallway with rooms on both sides, but the entire basement was not rooms. It had a study area and also a lounge space and a kitchen as well. There were desks, chairs, a few couches, and a TV. I went down there to do my homework so as to not disturb my roommate. Like I mentioned before, it was late, so pretty much everybody had gone to bed in the dorm building. The hallways were quiet. When I got down to the main floor, I was passing by the front area to go to the basement stairs. As I walked by the lobby, I overheard the sound of somebody banging on the door. It was coming from the small entrance area. Past the lobby was the small room between the locked doors and the first entrance doors to the dorm building out front. I walked over there, curious as to who was banging on the doors at this hour. They were banging rather loud as well. When I got there, I could not see anyone through the small window that was next to the door, but not the entire entrance area was in view, just right in front of the door and a little bit to the side. I decided to open the door. I don't know why. I guess I was just curious. When I did, suddenly this guy came out from next to the door. It was like he was hiding to the side of it. He walked right up and then said, "Thanks," and then walked right past me. It happened so fast I didn't even know how to react. I didn't mean to let him in. He just walked right up. I said nothing and watched as the man walked right into the lobby and then into a hallway. He looked a little bit older and I didn't recognize him, but I figured and hoped that he lived there and just forgot his key or something. The man was slightly short and had long dark hair, but it was kind of in a bun. So I went downstairs to the basement to finish my homework. Nobody else was down there, so I had the whole place to myself, and I was there for maybe an hour trying to somehow finish my work. Eventually, I was able to. After that, I walked back upstairs to go to my floor. As soon as I arrived on the 3rd floor, I saw down the hallway one person. It was the same guy who I had let into the building accidentally, and it looked like he was trying to open a door to a random room. When I started walking, he saw me, and then he turned and quickly started walking the other way, but then stopped. He had taken like 3 steps and then froze in his tracks. He then turned around and started walking towards me. I was just normally walking to my room. When the guy got a little bit closer, he said that he had somehow locked himself out of his room. Somehow, I just didn't believe him. I had never seen him on our floor or in our building before, and his behavior was beyond sketchy. I asked him if his roommate was awake. He said no, his roommate was out of town. I told him to call campus safety, and he said, "No, I'm good." This seemed odd, because that seemed like the only answer to me. Campus safety had the ability to unlock doors and stuff like that. All he would have to do is show his ID, and they would be able to look him up and get him back into his room. But that's only if he actually was a student there. I started to explain to him how it would work and they would be able to let him in. He nodded his head, but then interrupted me and said that he was good. I then said, "No, it's okay, I'll call them for you." At that point, it looked like he got nervous. He said, "Nah, I'm gonna try something else." Then he started walking away and left the floor to go into the stairwell. After he had gone off the floor, I decided to see where he went. I walked downstairs and then to the 2nd floor. When I got there, I saw the guy walking down the hallway. He looked over his shoulder, saw me, and then walked even faster. He got to the end of the stairs on the other side, so I went down another level to the 1st floor. I secretly looked around the corner from the stairwell to the hallway. I saw the guy very quickly walking down this hallway to the lobby, and then he left. I was glad to see him gone. I'm 99% sure that the guy didn't even go to our school. I'm not sure what he was trying to do, but it was very sketchy. After that night, I never saw him again. This happened only a couple of months ago. I live in the dorms at college with my best friend from high school. We are kind of night owls. I'm kind of a paranoid person, so this event still makes me feel a lot of paranoia when I'm walking around the dorms at night. Anyways, my roommate and I were watching television when we decided to order a pizza. We called the place and waited for about 30 minutes. We live up on the 7th floor, so we decided to take the elevator. We got to the ground level and found the pizza man. We paid him, and my roommate grabbed the pizza. Then we went into the elevator. We only went up to the 4th floor, an all-girls floor, We lived in a co-ed dorm complex. On the 4th floor, the elevator stopped. My roommate and I backed up to let whoever was on the floor into the elevator. The doors opened, and 3 men in their early 20s came in. They were foreign and spoke a different language. They looked at us, and one of them said, "Pizza, huh?" My roommate and I smiled. They then turned to each other and began laughing. They pressed floor 6, which later I remembered was an all-girls floor also, and continued to talk to one another in their own language. As I said before, I'm a very paranoid person, and I was starting to get bad vibes from these guys. I figured it was just because I didn't know what they were talking about, though. They got off on floor 6, told us to have a good night, and the doors shut. The elevator went up a floor, and soon we were out of the elevator. We started talking about pizza delivery women and how they must be harassed pretty frequently, which was kind of random, but I think both of us were still thinking about those guys, and we both must have got bad vibes from them. We just stepped into the room as we continued this conversation. I had to use the bathroom, so I stayed by the door. Now, I'm a tough talker, and I said something to the effect of, if a guy harassed me at work, I'd kick his butt. I said it in a much more expletive version though, and threw in some other inappropriate stuff at the end. I opened the door as I said this and looked out into the hallway. Before I could even step out of my door, I saw the 3 men in my hallway no more than 10 feet in front of the door. I then watched them run back to the elevator as soon as they saw me. I was stunned and it scared me. I slammed the door shut and locked it. My roommate asked what happened, and I sputtered out, "Those guys from the elevator were right next to our door." We freaked out for a bit and soon settled down. Maybe I overreacted, but it didn't make a whole lot of sense. If they knew someone on our floor, why did they run? How did they know which room we were in? We had only been in the room for less than a minute, and they must have taken the stairs, because they had got off on a different floor. Now, things would be different if that happened as its own incident, but just a couple of weeks before this event occurred, there was something else. It was another late night, maybe 2 weeks before, when I had to go to the bathroom, and so did my roommate. I opened the door to go out while my roommate grabbed her shoes. When I looked out, there was a man crouched behind a pillar next to the door that leads to the elevator. He was talking on his phone in a different language, similar to the one the men in the elevator were speaking, and looked at me when I came out of the room. I kind of backed back into the dorm room and told my roommate. We both brushed it off and went to the bathroom. He was still in the hallway, just crouching there. We went to the bathroom, and when we came back, the guy was gone. We went back into the room, and everything seemed fine. After these 2 things happened, I've begun to wonder if they were connected in any way. I'm probably just over-paranoid, but I still can't shake the feelings I got from the event. This story takes place back in the late 90s when my uncle was attending college at Sacramento State University at the time. During his time there, he would often walk around the campus to get his steps in for the day. Other days, he would sit underneath a tree or on tables at the outdoor dining area to chat with his friends or finish up his schoolwork. One day, while he was sitting under a tree doing his schoolwork, is when this happened. My uncle was minding his own business when he saw somebody walking towards him in his peripheral vision. He didn't think much of it at first, as he thought it was someone just walking past. He then noticed that the person was much closer to him, being about 15 feet away. He heard a woman's voice say hello to him, which he turned around to see who it was. To this day, he says when he looked at her, she was probably one of the most drop-dead gorgeous ladies he's ever seen. He describes her with vibrant blue eyes, long flowing blonde hair, wore a dark green dress, and overall had a siren-like beauty to her. He continued staring at her in awe and confusion for a moment until he found his voice. He soon asked her if she needed help with anything, to which she replied by saying yes, and she wanted to chat with him. With my uncle being single at the time, he saw no harm in talking to some girl. He did, however, feel like something was off about her, but he couldn't exactly tell what it was. He decided to talk with her, but to be cautious about it. He asked the lady for her name, and she replied that it was Kelly. My uncle also asked Kelly what she wanted to talk about, and she replied that she thought he was cute and wanted to hang out with him if he didn't mind. My uncle nervously agreed, and they began to talk with each other. He said that surprisingly, they had pretty good chemistry and shared a lot in common when they hung out together that day. Kelly asked my uncle if he wanted to hang out with her again, to which he responded with a yes. My uncle asked her if it would be alright if they hung out at the mall, and she happily agreed. Kelly hugged him and said that she couldn't wait to hang out with him again. Fast forward a few days later, and my uncle went to the mall and saw that Kelly was waiting for him there. They spent a few hours at the mall, and everything went over smoothly with no problems. My uncle and Kelly continued to hang out with no problems until the third week. During one of the times when they were together, Kelly asked him if he would be interested in wanting to join a special underground club that she was in. My uncle asked her what it was about and where it was located at. Kelly explained to him that it was a friendship club about getting closer with your friends and building a deeper bond through fun activities. My uncle asked what activities, and she didn't want to tell him as it would ruin the surprise she had for him. He asked her when the club meeting would be happening, and she responded by saying a few days from now. She also gave him the address. My uncle had looked up the address that night when he got home, and he saw that it was a sketchy part of downtown. He really liked Kelly though, so he decided that he would show up for her. Fast forward to the day of the club meeting, and my uncle made his way to the downtown area. He found the place where the meeting was supposed to be held, but he immediately got a bad vibe from it. The address had led him to an old decrepit rundown building that looked like it hadn't been used in years. He knocked on the door, and a man wearing a dark blue robe answered it. My uncle said that he was there for the meeting and asked if Kelly was there. The man gave him an odd look, studied him, and then told him to come in and that Kelly would be there soon. Upon entering the building, my uncle said that it was rather nice on the inside and it was dimly lit in there. He said that there were these weird lights on the wall and there were 5 people in the room wearing the same dark blue robes. My uncle looked ahead and noticed a long corridor with a row of weird lamps on both sides. The corridor seemed to stretch on for quite a bit until he noticed that it went down. The robed man told my uncle to follow him and that the meeting would start soon once everything was settled. The robed man then led him to the end of the corridor, which led down a short flight of stairs. At the bottom of the stairs there was a small path that led to an old wooden door. The path that led to the door was practically pitch black. My uncle had contemplated about turning around and walking away, but something told him not to, most likely the thought of Kelly being disappointed if he left. They went downstairs and through the door, which led to another corridor with the same weird lamps. My uncle remembered how this corridor had so many doors along with so many turns that he was sure he was walking through a maze of some sort. They both stopped at one of the doors, which the man had opened, and told my uncle to step in. My uncle peeked his head in the room, and he felt his heart skip a beat when he saw what was in there. He said the room was empty except for an old wooden chair sitting dead center of the room, along with a couple of single light bulbs hanging from the ceiling that barely lit up the room. The robed man told my uncle to have a seat and to wait there for about 10 to 15 minutes. Then someone would come in and get him, and Kelly would also be arriving at the same time as well. My uncle reluctantly stepped in and went to sit on the chair. The door closed. My uncle had gotten up from the chair and decided to explore the room to see if he could find anything. He was looking around until he noticed something on one of the walls. He looked and thought that it was either some random stain or drawing until he realized it wasn't. As he got closer to it, he saw that somebody had painted something on the wall with black paint. He looked at it a little more carefully this time and felt his blood run cold when he saw what it was. On one of the walls was a pentagram symbol that somebody had made with what appeared to be some dried blood marks as well. At that point, my uncle had seen enough and decided to get out of there immediately. My uncle opened the door carefully and as quietly as he could and began to quickly make his way out of there. While navigating the corridors, he heard some very loud and frantic pounding from one of the doors. He stopped momentarily to see what it was and if anybody needed help there, but there was no yelling, screaming, or cries for help. He wanted to investigate, but his instincts told him to ignore it and get out of there. He eventually found the door, went through it, and went up the stairs and sprinted outside. Oddly enough, the 5 other robed men that he saw earlier were not there, so he was relieved that he didn't have to deal with them, since he didn't know what he would have done at that moment. He left the building and went back home. During the rest of his time at college, he never saw or heard of Kelly again, or whatever her real name was. My uncle never called the cops and regrets it, as he'll never know if they got caught or who those people really were or what they were going to do to him. My uncle firmly believes that he was either going to be initiated or sacrificed by some evil cult. He believes that Kelly was used to lure him in and to gain trust, and to lower his guard. After that experience, he didn't go downtown for a very long time afterwards out of fear of being spotted by one of the cult members. My uncle is forever grateful that he was fortunate enough to escape, as he doesn't know what would have happened if he was stuck around in that room. I went to college in a big city and had 9 friends in my closest circle. We would hang out almost every day and just live our best lives. During our junior year, we had planned a boy-only weekend retreat at one of our buddies' farms about 2 hours from the city in the country. His dad owned about 200 acres and had a large chicken coop and a farmhouse with a pool. We were all excited. We had no idea that excitement would soon turn into something else that would remain with us for the rest of our lives. That Friday, we all packed our backpacks and left for the country on our motorcycles. All of us rode back then. We got to the farm and the party started. The first and second day went by. All fun until about 11 p.m. that Saturday. My buddy's dad that owns the farm called him on the landline and told him that one of their uncles had died in a small town about 2 more hours away. His dad was close with the deceased and wanted to check with us if we could go there and help the old lady that had just been widowed as she was alone. We all decided to ride there and help out. We left the farm around 11:30 p.m. and rode for 2 hours through country roads, some tar roads and some dirt roads as well. When we got close to the town, there was not a single person on the roads, just us 9 people on 9 motorcycles. The only lights on the road were from our vehicles. We pulled over on the side of the road to look for directions. Mind you, there were no iPhones or Google Maps back then. It was just good old-fashioned printed maps. After about 20 minutes of scratching our heads on where to go, we saw a light from a car in the distance. One of my friends flagged down the car as it came closer to ask where the town was. It turned out he was a resident of the town, so we decided to follow the car. It was already about 2 a.m. The guy in the car told us, "If any one of you are smokers, I recommend lighting a cigarette when we hit the dirt road." I asked him why, and he replied, "So the witches don't snatch you." I thought it was a bad attempt at humor given the hour. We started following him and we hit a wooded area with a thin dirt road. These woods were different. It was the summer, but these woods didn't have any leaves on the trees. As soon as we got deep into the woods, the guy in the car rolled down his window and he lit a cigarette. That's when I felt it, that eerie feeling deep inside my heart. I rode next to one of my friends who smoked and asked him to light his cigarette too. He laughed it off. I asked him to stop for a second and bummed a cigarette and lit it up myself. Now my helmet was off, I was puffing smoke, and the woods had this different type of silence. I got about halfway through my cigarette and that's when I heard it. A laugh. A scary, bone-chilling, heart-dropping cackle. I asked 2 of my friends who were riding next to me if they had heard it, and they confirmed it. I had not heard anything like that in my life. We rode close to each other for what seemed like an eternity, but it was only 15 minutes longer. When we got to the house, we thanked the guy and the car drove off. As we parked, we all looked at each other with the same question in our eyes. All 9 of us heard that laugh from atop the trees. It was not one cackle, but at least 5 times. Anyways, we knocked on the widow's door and she let us in. The poor lady was in shambles. We helped her out the entire next day and left before sunset. Right before we left her house, we were talking, and I brought up the nice man who had shown us where to go, how to get to her house. It was a small town, so she had me describe the car he drove and what he looked like, so that she could thank him later if she saw him. After some questioning back and forth, we discovered that the man who had helped us through the woods to the town was the widow's dead husband. He drove the same car and looked just like him when she showed us photographs. Possibly it was a very weird coincidence, but it was very strange. That night and that laugh has been etched in our memories forever. When we got back to the city after a few days, I asked my buddy's dad about the woods and the witch story. He told us that legend has it that a witch lives in those woods and snatches men who happen to be in the woods. She's afraid of fire, and that's why people light a cigarette when they drive through there at night. He thought it was all tales that the country folks made up. We've never told him the experience that we had firsthand that night. In my last year of college, I picked up a job on campus working at the front desk in one of the residence halls. This meant that I would be working weird overnight hours, but being the night person that I am, I was all for it. At the start of spring semester, a new student named Ryan moved into a vacant room on the first floor, not far from the front desk I sat at 3 nights a week. Ryan was a tall, lanky 20-something-year-old with blonde hair who showed no expressions and seemed to be a bit socially awkward. He had an off vibe about him from the start. In that first week, he came to the desk frequently to ask questions, and I gave him the best advice I could. Well, my kindness might have been a mistake. About a week later, I was sitting at my shift, 12 a.m. to 6 a.m., just minding my own business and catching up on some homework. Ryan came running down the hallway. He started a conversation trying to get to know me. I was being polite and listening, knowing he probably hadn't made a lot of connections yet being new. Well, he shifted the conversation and it started getting very weird. He inquired about things about me, and he started aggressively telling me how he was going to join the jiu-jitsu club so he could learn how to crush someone's windpipe, all while I was just sitting there listening, having only said a few words. Red flags were going up in my head the whole time, realizing that this guy might not be stable. He was pacing the floor, raising his voice at me, so I started recording the conversation in case I needed proof from my boss or if something happened. I even had the campus police number pulled up on my phone, because the conversation started getting extremely uncomfortable and he had a lot of anger in his voice. He would stare at me without blinking while he talked. As he carried on, I started to ignore him, hoping that he would just leave, for it was almost 2 a.m. at this point and I was all by myself. Luckily, he eventually went to bed, and when he did, I called my boyfriend immediately, almost in tears, to tell him what happened. Over the next few days, my coworkers would update me that Ryan had come to the desk looking for me, asking questions like, "What's her work schedule and where does she live?" Knowing that I work mostly nights, this was unsettling because I did not like being at the desk alone with him. This continued over weeks, where he would come to the desk and ramble for an hour about unsettling ideas or weird things. He would often ask me about another girl who lived there, things like if he could have her phone number, what floor she lived on, what her room number was, and if she was single. He was seeming really sketchy to me, and it got to the point that if I heard a door open on the first floor, I would run to hide in the closet so he wouldn't know I was working. Sometimes my boyfriend would sit there with me if Ryan wouldn't leave. Another night specifically, I texted a coworker to call me from the desk phone to say there was an incident that they needed help with on the 3rd floor so I could escape. He tried to follow me upstairs, putting his hand on the elevator door so that it wouldn't shut. I pretended like I was taking a form up to my coworker and hid out in the 3rd floor common area for about 30 minutes, hoping he would be gone. When I got off the elevator, right as the doors opened, I saw his expressionless face staring back at me, like he waited the whole time for me to come back. I acted like I got the wrong form, switched it, and headed back upstairs for another 45 minutes to be sure he was gone. Luckily, when I came back, he was. I eventually brought it up to my boss, as did a few coworkers of mine who were worried about my safety, since it was always the middle of the night, and he decided to feed off my vulnerability of being alone. She ended up having a conversation with him because he was making a lot of residents and staff uncomfortable, and said the next time he gets a complaint, they're filing it with campus police. After the first 2 months, I didn't have any more issues with him, but I always hid any time I thought that he was coming. Leaving work was very scary because I parked so far away and the parking lot isn't very well lit, but I'm thankful that nothing bad ever happened. I'd hate to think about how long this could have gone on or if I had said the wrong thing during one of those creepy nights. The way my college was set up was basically 2 large hills. Classrooms, administration buildings, and libraries were on one hill, and the dorms and cafeterias were on top of the other. In the valley between the 2 hills was where the gyms and sports centers were located. I was studying engineering and would often stay late in one of the study rooms until 1 or 2 a.m. One night I was alone walking back to my dorm around midnight, and I saw a guy standing at the top of the hill. Nobody else was around, and I was at the bottom of the hill. I had seen this guy on campus before, and he always gave me the creeps. His eyes looked really unhinged, and he often walked with jerky, almost frantic movements. Usually, I didn't think too much of it. I assumed he was a student and maybe had some physical or psychological issues. A few of my classmates had severe OCD and would do quirky things while out and about, but none of them had the same look in their eyes as this guy. I wouldn't say it was an evil look, but his eyes always seemed untethered from reality. I always got the sense he was seeing something a lot darker than the rest of us. On this night in particular, as soon as I saw him, I got a bad case of the creeps. He was coming down the hill straight for me, so I casually crossed to the other side of the path. He followed so that he was still coming straight for me. Again, I crossed the path, and he did the same. I was getting nervous when suddenly some guys came out from the soccer field at the bottom of the hill. The creepy guy noticed them, and when I moved out of his path, he didn't follow me. As I passed by him, I noticed that he was staring at me, so I glared back to let him know not to mess with me. After that night, I started walking a different route behind the tennis courts to avoid him. It was kind of risky since it was late at night and nobody was ever around there, but I also began calling my parents on my nightly walks back home, and that helped too. I saw that guy a few more times on campus during the day, but I never caught him looking at me again. Hopefully, my glare scared him off. I still have no idea if he was a student or just some random weirdo hanging around looking to cause trouble.